This is Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. It's powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To get an extended 30-day trial, visit shopify.com/masters. Hey entrepreneurs, my name is Felix and I'm the host of the Shopify Masters podcast. Each week we put out podcast interviews with successful e-commerce entrepreneurs or experts to give you inspiration, motivation, and actionable tips to increase your traffic and sales so your store can generate the sales you need to live the life you want. In the last episode, Jeff Phillips from Beardo.com goes over his list of criteria to create a giftable product to sell during the holiday shopping season. On this episode, two first-time entrepreneurs join us to talk about how they started a $15 million watch company with one founder in China. In this episode, you'll learn why one of the founders moved to China to start a business, why you should launch on Kickstarter even if you already have a completed product, and how to price your products correctly. Today I'm joined by Andrew and Ryan Beltran from originalgrain.com. That's ORIGINALGRAIN.com. Original Grain is the premier maker of all natural wood and stainless steel watches and was started in 2012 and based out of San Diego, California. Welcome, Andrew and Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, excited to have you guys on. So tell us a bit more about your story and these watches that you sell.
Yeah, so I think we can, like you mentioned, 2012 was kind of more when the idea was conceptualized. I was actually living in China, of all places at the time. I moved out there in 2011 after graduating from college. We both grew up in Oregon, Pacific Northwest. And after school, I just said, hey, it's time for a change. Let's mix it up. I moved halfway around the world. Was really looking for an opportunity. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Taught English part-time just to get by, pay the bills. Had an amazing experience and, kind of fell into it. I always wanted to start a brand. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. That's why I moved out there. So when I was living in China, I basically came across the idea and I was like, hey, there's these wooden watches. And, as soon as I saw them, the light bulb went off and I realized, hey, there could be something here, And so I did a little bit of research. I saw that there are a few companies out there doing all wood watches. There was actually a really cool company in Portland that some of you may know. It's called Schwood. They do all wood sunglasses. They actually were a big inspiration just because of everything they had done and it's made in America and all that. But and I was like, hey, what's something I could do? That's a little different and basically pioneer a new category within the watch niche. And so anyway, I started playing with the idea over there and kind of conceptualized it in 2012.
Okay, cool. So you wanted to start a brand, like you were saying. You wanted to be an entrepreneur, and you said you were in China at this point?
Yeah, I moved out there in 2011, and then in 2012, I kind of started playing with the idea.
Yeah, so why China? Why did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, and then people think about startups, they think about the big cities, and I guess probably in the U.S. for the most part. If you're in fashion, maybe you're in New York, maybe you're in tech, maybe you're in San Francisco, but you're talking about moving to the other side of the world in China to be an entrepreneur. What made you attracted to that location to start a business?
I think definitely the reason was because I knew that I wanted to go straight to the source. If I wanted to do a physical product, a branded product, I knew that I would more than likely be manufacturing it at scale in China. It's just kind of the way things go. I wasn't necessarily going for a brand that had the whole made in America thing. So for me, I knew that I would ultimately probably be out there. So for me, I was kind of utilizing that as somewhat of a competitive advantage and being located in southern China. I lived in Guangzhou. I was able to literally go into the factories, work on the first designs with them in person. I spent over a year, on that first design. Andrew and I both did. And so we just, it was a huge point of leverage for us in the beginning.
Very cool. So did you have other ideas that you're bouncing around at the time, or were these wooden watches, your very first kind of idea and you just kind of ran with it?
It was the pretty much the first idea. And honestly, it didn't take much research to realize that there was a void in the market for these watches, and no one had done it. And again, people had done wood watches, but no one had done wood and steel watches. And as soon as I got that first sample, I realized that these were in some ways an upgraded version of what was already on the market, a little more durable, a little more stylish, at least in my opinion. And it could definitely, serve a need.
Right. And this is Andrew again. As soon as I was introduced to the watches and Ryan had shown me them, he was, really excited about it. And kind of going back to our roots, where we're from in the Northwest, being outdoors, infused with nature at all times, this product really is inspiring to us and kind of holds a little bit of a mark of who we are. And, whether crafted in China or, made in the U.S., the wood does go through a pretty gnarly handcrafted process. It's not necessarily pour molds and get the watches out, put a logo on it, and that's something I know Ryan's always spoke to. And, I fell in love with, too, was the process and just how the wood grain looks. And, that's something that we loved right off the bat, and we wanted to go to work.
Okay, so while Ryan was running around China, Andrew, were you in the U.S.? Like, what were you doing at the time?
Yeah, so I have a little different kind of background, I guess. I was actually in the military. I was in the Marine Corps prior to doing the watch business. So yeah, I wanted to get, right out of high school, I joined the Marines. I wanted to serve the country, and did that. I was a field radio operator, and it's funny how it all worked out. I was returning from my first tour. And we just so happened to stop in Hong Kong on the way back, and so we had 3 days, like R&R. I guess we're headed home though, and so obviously I let Ryan know in advance, and he was there, and he showed me the samples, on site, and I obviously was really excited the moment I saw him, and we kind of got to work from there.
Yeah, as soon as it was kind of another one of those light bulb moments where aha moment, like. Wait a minute, we could do this together,
right.
And Andrew's actually younger than I am,
right.
but he had the money at the time, and he'd saved a little bit. I needed some money to make those first samples,
right.
first run of watches, and I was like, well, how about we do this together?
Right.
He believed in it, and it was like within a second, he was like, yep, I'll give it to you. And so that's kind of how we went into business together, right. And it's worked out.
Yeah, it definitely was always a dream. We figured it'd happen later in life to work together and just kind of be, we grew up best friends, and he was always kind of a role model for me, kind of like helped me get through a lot of things. So to see it happen at a young age and how it's really played out, it's been a blessing for sure.
Yeah, very cool how it all worked out for you guys. So Andrew, Ryan, when you were in China and you were at these factories, like tell us a little more about this. I think this is a really interesting story because a lot of times I have entrepreneurs come on here that will say that started businesses outside of China, but then realize that you really have to be at the factory, or at least at the very beginning, spend time in the same city where your goods are being made, at least just to make sure the quality is there, make sure the iterations are a lot faster. But you started right there. You were searching for, I guess, manufacturers on the ground. So tell us about that experience. Like, how did you even begin this search? So you had this idea for these wooden stainless steel watches. Then what? Like, how did you even begin to look for these manufacturers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge advantage, first and foremost, to be located in China, in southern China especially, because that's where I don't know if many people know, but a lot of the manufacturing in general happens. Apple has their Foxconn's there, and electronics galore, but also watches. A big hub for watches is in Shenzhen, which is about an hour train ride from Guangzhou, where I was living. So yeah, I mean, I think again, I had the advantage and the luxury of being located there, and it helped us tremendously. Just because I was able to, like you said, go into the factories, meet with them, make revisions in real time. I mean, we didn't have a designer. This was our first business. I was 23 when the idea. So I didn't have any money or the ability to hire a designer. And so I was leaning on them, and my Chinese wasn't that good, but I had some friends, and that's kind of how actually I found a lot of the suppliers initially, was just through my network that I had built over the last year and a half prior while living there. And a lot of the friends that I made had sourcing backgrounds, and they knew suppliers or knew friends of friends that knew watchmakers. And there's fairs, and there's ways to if you're located, that makes it easy. You don't have to fly 16 hours and pay the travel fees. So it was an amazing experience, and it also helped us a lot in the beginning.
Cool. So, you were young, like you're saying, you're in your early 20s at the time. You didn't have cash. You didn't have the money. Did they take you seriously when you started meeting these manufacturers? Did it take any convincing at all? Like, what was the initial experience like when you had the very first meetings with these manufacturers?
That's an interesting point. I think they actually at first didn't take me all that seriously. If I think back on it, I think in the beginning, I had to bring in, I brought a friend of mine, so she kind of posed as my assistant. I'll never forget that. I was like, can you come with me to the factory? She, obviously she was Chinese, so obviously she spoke the language. And I think that helped me a little bit, just not seem like some random white guy standing in the factory looking for 100 watches, I didn't even, what's an MOQ? So, yeah, I think at first maybe it was a little bit, strange for them, but I found a decent supplier who was able to do what I needed to do. Since then, we've been kind of to Andrew's point about these watches being handcrafted and rather difficult to make. We've been through. This is we're our fourth supplier, I think. So, we definitely made changes since the beginning to where we're at now.
Right.
Cool. So on the other side of this, then were you ever worried about, being had because, you were coming into these places, you didn't really speak the language that well, and maybe you look like an easy target, right? Because there's this guy that wants to start a business, of course, will take his money. It's an experience I think a lot of businesses have early on. I don't think it's as big. I think it's a bigger issue when you can't see them face to face. But did you ever, not have the kind of trust early on because you were surrounded by, people that, not surrounded by people that you didn't know, but just like they've worked with, companies that are much bigger than yours. Were you ever worried about being taken advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, this is Andrew, and we actually did come across that a few times. Watchmaking alone is pretty difficult. From the movement to the materials, to the steel, to the glass cover, and we went through a few phases where we were getting had, as you said, and we thought we were paying a little bit more premium for something that it actually wasn't that. So, we did have to, self-teach ourselves a lot of things, and just really refine the process and, checks and balances across the board, and for the first actually few years, Ryan did handle all our production and development, and it was definitely a crazy learning curve, and there was late nights and.
Yeah, I mean, at some point I had to move back, so I moved to the States and to progress a little bit in the story in 2000, back to the States in 2014. So I've been back for almost 3 years, crazy. And so then, it was a little more difficult to manage. So I had to fly back over there. Since then we've hired full-time, people on the ground as well as someone here in the States who goes over a few times a year. But yeah.
Very cool. So now that you have this experience of going through the very early stages of working with these manufacturers, how would you prevent this? If there's an entrepreneur out there that's thinking about working in manufacturing, maybe they don't have the ability or the advantage of being on the ground floor at these factories. What kind of advice can you give them to make sure that they don't run into these issues where they are, potentially being exploited, I guess?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, the product will help you identify the things. So for example, like Andrew said, watches are difficult because there's so many different materials that they're using, from the movement to the glass to the steel to the, whereas maybe something that's, a widget or made from molded plastic might not be something you have to worry so much about being taken on, just because you just need to make sure the quality's on par. I think the first thing I would say is definitely go over there, like you kind of were saying in the beginning, and meet them face to face. Chinese, from what I experienced and just culturally, they have a lot of respect for people who actually go and meet with them face to face. I know a lot of people already know that, but it's worth the investment in going over there. So I think that's step number one for sure. And then just, during the process, when your first big run comes out, go back over there. I mean, maybe that's the first time you go over there, and right as stuff's being finished, check it by hand personally. And, it's going to be difficult for them to take you on that if you're sitting there in the factory. I mean, we've done that ourselves, and now that we have a QC team, there's always going to be concerns. There's always going to be issues, but I mean, you can obviously just do your best to make sure, the quality's on point. They're not, using things they're not they're saying they
right.
are.
And like anything, it's really relationship based. The more face time you have with, their Laoban, which is, boss, and I probably didn't say that right. Well, the more FaceTime you have with them and the more that, it's like Ryan said, they'll respect you more. And it's just building that relationship with the factories. And we had a sourcing agent at one time too, and we made sure he was in there a few times a week. And yeah, it's just make sure they see your company's name across their desk a bunch, it seems like.
Yeah, it makes sense. So when you were working in these factories, did you go through, what was the iteration process? Like how many times would you say you had to go through these iterations before you had a product that was good enough?
On the first one, I think it was 2 or 3. It might have been more like 4 or 5, to be honest, just because, it was, again, we didn't have a real designer here in the States doing it for us. Actually, Andrew and I didn't ourselves, which is a funny story for another day. But, it took a few times, and I remember the first one we got, we were like, heaven forbid, like this, we can't sell this, you know what I mean? And then, same thing goes but then you learn that. And so like for the next collection, and then honestly, our most recent collection that's actually coming out, it's on pre-sale now, it'll be available next month. That took us a year. I mean, but you understand that and you work it into your timeline as a company, when you're first starting, it's almost like you want instant gratification, you want it now. But as you grow up, you realize that like there's a timeline and there's a merchandising strategy and there's a product development timeline. And that's something we've learned. And now that we understand that, we can work within those timelines and we know there's going to be iterations. That's just, that's
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, that you don't want to rush things. And like you're saying, it's a process to this, and you can't always rush the process. But now that you've been through this a few times, were there things that you learned along the way that you either worked on improving or maybe even removed to reduce this iteration time?
I mean, I think the first thing was there's not really that much you can do, to be honest. Like I said, the iteration process is only natural, but we were able, now that we have the resources just financially, to bring someone on and help us make these to help with the design process. That definitely helped 100%. Because even the first chronograph watch, the one that's coming out next month, that we just saw an image when our product development manager was in China just 2 weeks ago, and he sent us an image of the watch in China that was the first sample that we got back from them of this watch, and it looked like a toy. I mean, you just come so far on anything, and so I don't know. It's difficult to cut it short. I don't know
if you really want to, right? You just need to take the proper steps to improve it. That's what we're really about. We're kind of gnarly into always improving the process and the product. And we're always refining. So we will go through 3 or 4 different reiterations. Just to make sure we hit everything we like, whether it's how the crown looks, the indentation on the bezel, we're pretty.
Yeah. Any business owner knows, right?
Yeah. The details. For sure. So, when you had that first iteration, I think one of you were saying that you saw and you said, there's no way we can sell this. What made you think to let's go back and fix this rather than say, you know what, this might not be the right industry for us. We don't have what we need, whether it be the factories or the design or just the expertise to make this better. What made you guys decide that let's keep on doing this, let's keep on trying to improve this thing rather than trying to move on to something else?
For me, it's going to kind of sound funny. I wanted to make it right because I owed my brother some money, and I knew I was going to be able to pay him back unless this thing would sell. So I don't know, Andrew. Do you have anything on that? Or?
Yeah, that I didn't really think about that, but that goes to kind of testament to Ryan. Honestly, Ryan's a perfectionist. That's kind of his side and his personality, and a lot of successful people are like that. They want to make sure it's exactly how they want to sell it and present it, and it wasn't good enough. So you got to set your standards high, for everything.
Okay, cool. So you also mentioned that at this point you're on your 4th supplier. Is that what you said?
Yeah, we're our 4th one. So the thing with our watches is we've got we have a watch manufacturer who makes the steel, and they'll source the movement, and they'll source the generic typical watch parts like crowns and the whole thing. And then we have a wood cutting source as well that, helps us source the wood, manufacture the wood, cut the wood, And so our process is a little more complicated than most watchmakers just because of the wooden element. So we're on our 3rd watch manufacturer and on our 4th wood supplier, wood cutter, So And then we just brought that in-house actually we bought the machines in China to cut the wood. Like, we're pretty far down the road now, so we've kind of taken those steps. That's helped a ton.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, so what makes you decide to switch suppliers or manufacturers?
I think the biggest thing is quality, and then behind that would be pricing, and then honestly, volume and ability to deliver within the lead times. And one of the suppliers, he just couldn't hit the lead times. I mean, it was like 60 to 90 days, pretty standard, but then you start hitting 120 and it's like 4 months, just too long. And so you got to have a reliable, supplier on all fronts. Lead time's huge. But again, I mean, at the end of the day, quality is just as important, right?
Mm-hmm. So when you are evaluating new suppliers and new manufacturers to move on to next, what's that process like? I mean, are you just asking them what's your lead time and asking them these questions? Because how much can you, I guess, trust? I sound so untrustworthy right now to these manufacturer suppliers based on my questions. But how do you interview, I guess, or how do you determine what's a good supplier, what's a manufacturer when you are trying to improve your supply chain?
Yeah, so I know Matt, who's our product development, manager. He would definitely be able to answer better than I would. But if I had to say, just from my experience, who are their current clients? Who are they already making product for? Granted, they might be a competitor, or they might not be. But if they can deliver for them, you gotta bet they can deliver for you. In the beginning, it's going to be tough because until you hit certain volumes with a supplier that is good, you're going to be pretty low on the totem pole in terms of just like the volume. And so you'll run into issues, sure. But, at the end of the day, it's a little bit of a gut instinct and also just like, who are they working with? I mean, that's kind of a big one for us for sure.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember that original investment? Like, how much did you owe to Andrew at the end of the day? What was that initial investment, or what was the minimum order quantity that you had to hit before these manufacturers started talking to you?
Well, yeah, today it sounds funny, but at the time it was a lot of money. I think it was like 10,000.
Yeah,
around 10, like 9 or 10,000. And I think the initial run was like 300 watches.
300 watches. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew was trying to sell them out of his backpack until the other light bulb went off. Yeah. And we decided we wanted to do a Kickstarter, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah, definitely want to talk about the Kickstarter in a bit. Before we move on to that, though, you mentioned that today you have hired some roles, not just, I guess you have roles on the ground in China, and then also someone in your locally or in your office that works directly with the manufacturers as well.
Yeah. We have somebody here kind of helps with all of the product design development and works with the manufacturers. And we have a few other bodies here to kind of take some of the load off me and Ryan and just kind of really drive that, whatever it is their job is, social media manager, as well as creative director. Yeah.
Very cool.
Digital advertiser as well. So
yeah. So did you also have someone working for you in China?
Yeah. So my first assistant over there, she's still on board with us, and she knows the product really well. She's just total angel, so we're blessed to have her. And then we do have a what do you call them? Like a QC team, but also there's like a product. I can't think of the name of it, but basically they help facilitate the production side of it and make sure that everything's running smoothly. And then Joanna, our assistant, is just kind of our right hand girl who works with us day to day, and then is the liaison between us and that product management company and the factory. If that makes sense. Yeah,
that's cool that you have a quality control team that's independent from the supplier or the manufacturer. How do they work though? How do they work for you? Like, what are they doing on a not necessarily day-to-day basis, but what kind of tasks are they responsible for?
The quality control team?
Yeah.
They're really in charge of checking orders as they come out. So, we know based on our lead time when an order is going to be about to be delivered, and they'll go literally into the factory and they will check either every piece in the beginning, if it's a new supplier especially, or a large percentage of it. And at some point you have to kind of just play the percentage game, right? And, you're talking orders of 10,000, 15, 20,000, 30. I mean, however many watches you're making, it's going to be difficult to check every watch, and also be rather expensive. So in the beginning, definitely with a new supplier, we would check, it'd be 100% QC. And then you kind of taper back as they prove themselves. And then we had an additional QC here in the States with our fulfillment center. Prior to sending a watch, they literally open the box, make sure there's a watch in there, which there should be. And then obviously kind of check the crown, make sure everything's good. There's no blemishes on the wood. And so there was kind of a twice over on the watch before it actually gets to the customer.
Yeah, this might be an interesting strategy for folks that might not be able to go to the manufacturers at least all the time, is to have someone there doing the quality control for them. So do you need to hire, or do you hire a full-time team over there, or you hire them by a project? Like, what's the business arrangement usually with a quality control team?
Yeah, it's definitely by project. So you're not there. More than likely, they wouldn't be, because a lot of quality control companies have like lots of clients. And so they're just hired at, service oriented. So, when you have an order coming out, they're your go-to for QC. Obviously you have a relationship with them. There's going to be some type of charge based on the number of units they're checking. Usually there's a daily rate. It's actually not by the number of units. But you can break it down that way as well. In an 8-hour day, they can check 100 watches or 200 watches, and then you can just do the math. But yeah.
Yeah. And is quality something that's, quantitative? Like, how do you... That's such a weird question to ask. But how do you measure? How do you tell them? How do you communicate to these QC teams what you're looking for?
Yeah, so when it comes to that, there's a document. I mean, it's just kind of like a systems and procedure. So they're looking at for us with our product. Every product's different again. But for us, there's going to be the clasp, there's going to be the band, there's going to be wood, there's going to be how it's inlaid, there's going to be the belt. There's just every element of the watch, and then they're literally going through and checking everything that we ask them to. And then there's a report that comes back with any defects, with images. Literally, they take photos in the factory and put them in the document. Typically, there's not that many, but there's definitely some, which is why you have them.
Very cool. So, okay, so now you have, at least the initial run, you have these 300 watches that are made. Then what? Like, what did you do with them? How did you sell those?
So we weren't necessarily sure at the time. We had our website up. We weren't sure how to drive traffic. We had our social media going. Weren't sure how to do that either. But yeah, we were honestly, I was out selling out of the backpack, doing kind of super bootstrap, guerrilla, no experience type sales, which obviously isn't the route to go. And as Ryan said, the light bulb went off that we should look into crowdfunding and just getting these on the market, getting in front of a bunch of eyeballs and seeing how people react to them. And that's exactly what we did. March 2013. Yeah. And we ended up raising, I think, over $330,000, I think, on our first campaign. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the first testament, knowing that what we had was something special, and that we needed to really dive in.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So Kickstarter for you guys, you have two campaigns. We'll start with the first one. That was the original grain, I guess is the title of the Kickstarter campaign. You had a goal of $10,000, ended up raising almost $400,000 from over 2,000 backers. So that $10,000 that you wanted to raise, was this more like a sale? Because you guys already had the products itself. Like, what did you need the money for? Was it just a straight up sale, or do you need to reinvest that $10,000?
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, it was kind of like almost like pulling it back and starting over again. Like, we had like these 200 or 300 watches. Like, we weren't really sure how to sell. Like, let's almost in some ways like reset and relaunch this via Kickstarter. We hadn't even launched it. So really just launch it via Kickstarter and use that as our launch pad, which obviously worked out really well. Again, we didn't clearly by our goal, $10,000. We had no idea like how well it was going to go. And even when Andrew's looking at the campaign now, it's funny to look at it, but there's a very genuine, approach. And I think it resonated really well with people. We also launched during a time when Kickstarter was relatively new. Crowdfunding in general was relatively new. We were featured pretty much on the home page for almost 30 days, which was a huge advantage now. Yeah. I mean, there's always an element of luck, right? With most success stories. And I think for us, that was our little piece of luck for the for the company when we launched, was like, hey, this got in front of a lot of people, but also it validated the product. I mean, you can get anything in front of a lot of people, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to buy it. But people did, and that was like our validation, for the product and the business, and really what took us forward, gave us the cash to invest in inventory, obviously deliver the products to the backers, have a little bit of money for marketing, and kind of get on our way.
Yeah, I've heard this recently with Kickstarter because at one point I think it was heavily used to basically fund an idea. No product yet, no even roadmap to create the product, just to fund an idea. Now it's gotten to the point where it's an effective way to launch a product where the product is already completed or very close to completion, just needs the funds to place that initial run, that initial order. But I think Kickstarter has evolved a lot. It's now a great way to just launch a product. And I've seen the statistics. I've even heard people on this podcast talk about statistics about how people just spend more time on Kickstarter than on like a product page. And because they spend more time on a Kickstarter page, you have more opportunity to explain your product. And I think it's just a much more engaged audience. So I think what you guys did back then is still an effective strategy today, even if you already have an existing product. You didn't have an official launch. Yeah, I think it's you guys hit the nail on the head with the reason why you wanted to go with it. Yeah, so get $10,000 was the goal. Raise almost $400,000, and the campaign you said lasted about 30 days. Were you guys freaking out that all this came in, or were you excited? Like, what were the emotions like during this period?
Yeah, I love this story because I was in China when we launched. I hadn't moved back. This was March 2013. I moved back till the following year. I remember the night before we launched because it was about 11 a.m. We wanted to launch in the morning here in the States. So China's about, I think it was 14, 15 hours ahead. So I don't know what the math was, but around 7 a.m. would have been like 10 p.m. in China. So we pressed launch, and I was so didn't know. I remember calling Andrew the night before on Skype and being like, I think we can do 40, 50,000. The goal is 10. Obviously, let's be modest about that. But I think we'll do 40 or 50. That was kind of the high goal for us. And I literally pressed launch. I'd been working so hard. I went to sleep. I don't even know how I went to sleep. But I went to sleep. And I wake up, and there are, my Facebook's exploded. I have 100 messages from my brother. Skype's going off. And I'm like, what's going on, And I wake up, and we've got, I don't know. I think it was 20,000 or something. It was crazy. And so
this is just overnight.
Pretty much overnight. So it was one of those felt like I made $1 million overnight. Obviously, it was only 20 grand, but the way I felt, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So once you guys got these funds, the campaign ended. How did you even decide to how to use the money? Well,
actually, I think Andrew, you probably answered that pretty well. I mean, we didn't know. We didn't know. I think that's a pretty humble beginnings. Neither of us had a solid background, and it's not like we came from a previous brand or an agency or anything like that. We really just had that entrepreneurial instinct, and so when we got the money, it was well, let's make the watches. We got to make those. We got to deliver them, and then let's obviously put a decent chunk back into inventory so we have more watches to sell. Just business went on, right? And then from there, we actually wanted to take a very retail approach. That was our quote unquote strategy, right? So we weren't sure about online marketing. We didn't know. So we were well, let's start getting into retail, so to speak. And so we put together these kits, and we, literally go out and try and sell them, which is kind of funny. We realized that's not how it works. But at the time, that's really what we were trying to do. We put some money into advertising here and there, but again, we didn't really know, and so we were kind of learning as we went.
Yeah, as Ryan said, we didn't come from necessarily a background, so a lot of this is self-taught. It's funny to think how far we've come in 3 years. Our strategy currently is I think really on par with a lot of successful companies and brands, but at the time you didn't know where to go. And at one point we ended up having a guy consulting us. That's actually our product developer now, Matt. And he was he came from the industry. He worked with a few brands. So he kind of shepherded us along the way, where to put your chips, how to structure your company, how to set a business plan, and how to align it with your marketing. And that just really helped us through our first year, to kind of just, we still had a successful first year, even post Kickstarter, still a ton of, organic traffic coming to the site, and people, still interested in the product when they'd see it. And then, we ended up launching our second campaign, and that's really when we turned on the jet fuel and understanding kind of what we were doing, how big the internet is, what the beast that it is, and how you can really, get involved, through all the different channels. And that's when we were kind of running at full steam. I guess we started getting going.
Yep.
Yeah, hearing about how you guys talk about your story, it kind of almost helps me visualize two types of businesses that get started. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are in one of these two camps, which is one where you're almost like constantly pushing this big boulder up a hill. Every inch you're pushing it with all you've got. For you guys, it almost seems like this thing just had a life of its own and just took off, and you were on this ride with it and just trying to figure it out along the way. Like, first of all, is that a fair assessment of how it feels?
Yeah, it totally speaks to the product that we've created. It's very unique, and like you said, we jumped on the roller coaster with this thing, and it really is a testament to what we have. And then, we were figuring it out day to day for sure. Yeah,
and I've heard of other very quickly successful businesses where the Uber success of it all is actually detrimental to the business, where you're just growing too fast. You're jumping from the minor leagues because you guys are just trying to figure it out now into the major leagues because of all this funding, all these customers. You're dealing with much larger orders. At any point, did you ever feel like you're about to fall off this ride?
I don't think so. Not in the beginning. I think if anything, it'd be now. The growth is even crazier at this point than it was back then. I mean, a successful Kickstarter campaign is relatively easy to manage. There was growth for sure. Don't get me wrong, but there wasn't massive scale in the beginning. It was more of like a validation again of the concept. A lot of time spent on figuring out who our customer is, figuring out the pricing model that we wanted to work at, whether that was online versus retail. I mean, even at one point, we were like, do we market ourselves as direct to D2C, like direct to consumer with this, and price accordingly, versus being retail, and pulled that back. And like, we've done a lot of things over the last, really 2013 we launched, but 2014 was our first year in business. Like, we had product to sell. And then 2015, last year, was a lot about just figuring out the real strategy of what we wanted to do, building out the product collections and planning for this year. And so, that kind of gets us to where we are now.
Very cool. So when once you had that successful Kickstarter campaign, you guys returned back to Kickstarter in 2015 last year, had another, relatively modest goal of $25,000 and blew that out the water again, raising $433,000 from 2,442 backers. So when you returned to Kickstarter, was this a similar situation where you already had the product ready to go and you just wanted to use Kickstarter as a launch pad? Like, what was the state of the product at that point?
Yeah, so we actually, at this point, I think you mentioned this earlier, we didn't have any inventory. So we purely used Kickstarter as a way to more or less, like a lot of companies, pre-sell. In a lot of ways, you're pre-selling product. And so, and obviously bring in some money to invest in inventory. So that was really what we used it for. And on this second campaign, is we knew we were probably going to do pretty well. We had obviously had that success. We had a decent sized following, good email list, knew how to market a little bit online. And so, we thought we would do, honestly, we were shooting for about 500, 600. Right. And so we were a little short, but still, relatively successful and gave us some money to, again, put back into the company.
And did you change anything between the first and second campaign in terms of how you promoted it, how you set up the campaign page, or anything involving the marketing of a Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, I'd say it switched up, quite a bit. The first campaign was pretty amateur. The second campaign was pretty pro. I'd put behind it, in regards to PR. We were featured on a lot of different tech blogs and fashion blogs. We kind of had all that queued up. We had a few samples that we had sent out to, was it GQ, 9to5Mac, TechCrunch, just so they could review and kind of put their notes behind it to their following. And we had a pretty good story. What we were doing, again, we were reclaiming whiskey barrels at the time. So, that's something unique and special, especially for the Kickstarter community. They really take pride in bringing, rad shit to market. And, whiskey barrel, reclaiming that down is something obviously can drive mass appeal. So we're definitely bringing A game, I think.
Yeah. Do you find that that's the best use of any Kickstarter creator's time is on the PR, getting early samples to these outlets?
I think it's pretty, I think it definitely helps. It gets that initial boost, you want people to be talking about it and it trending, links being shared. PR blast went out, we had a ton of great coverage happening. So
with anything, you're always looking at the ROI, right? So, I mean, PR is great. From our experience, PR doesn't drive always the most, like the best ROI, right. Free, like it's just 100% ROI, but like, even if it's somewhat pay to play or whatever, none of these work for the second Kickstarter. But see, since then, we've done some, paid right. PR coverage and this and that. I think what PR does more than anything is it helps establish credibility and
right.
and like a sense of like, just credibility for the consumer that like this is a legitimate product. These people wouldn't put their name behind it unless it was.
Right.
Yeah, you're definitely kind of borrowing some of the credibility from these outlets because they're, like you're saying, they're putting their name behind your project. I think that's a great way of putting it. So do you, today, 2015, your first Kickstarter was back in 2012. Do you feel like the crowdfunding community has changed? And if so, how? Do you feel like it's saturated? Like, what are your thoughts on people that want to launch a Kickstarter today or crowdfunding in general?
I think it's changed tremendously. I would say it's unfortunate, but it's not. I mean, there's a lot more people going to the site. And I guess let me say the reason I would almost say it is because it's harder to stand out. It definitely is more difficult now today than it was when we did the first one. Not necessarily the second one, because I think it's similar to what it was back then, even in 2015. I mean, it's only been a year since, but it's harder to stand out now than it was back then. So it requires a little more preparation, execution. You can be authentic, you can be genuine, and I think that goes a long way. But at the end of the day, it's harder to get eyeballs on the campaign without a little bit of paid advertising.
Yeah.
I think the organic traffic back in 2013 again was a little bit of a lucky charm and helped kind of get us in front of a lot of people.
Makes sense. So once you had maybe the first successful Kickstarter campaign, did you have your own independent website at that time? Like, what was the transition like into owning your own kind of domain, your own website?
Yeah, we had a website that we had pretty much built out. Nothing like we have today. It was pretty bare bones. Just, we only had one collection, about 4 or 5 different SKUs. So, we had a website that was ready, and then about halfway through the campaign, and on that first one, we used it as a way to kind of like promote like our website's up, and people really liked that, and they thought it was cool. They could go to an official page and check out the watches in a different setting, and so we had something.
Cool. So now that you have your own store, the originalgrain.com, what's been the most successful way for you to drive the traffic and sales to that site?
Well, we do a lot of different things. Right now, I'd say it's online with paid advertising, primarily on Facebook. I think that's right now the number one way to drive scale outside of, maybe influencer marketing if you were to get on a huge celebrity or something, but that costs a lot. So I think your biggest bang for your buck is going to be online advertising through Facebook. We do some display advertising. We work with Pinterest. We work with a lot of different. Actually, Andrew manages our whole social influencer program with another guy on the team. So we do a lot of different things. I mean, we have a PR guy who really he probably been in, I don't even know. We just looked at it the other day, 60 or 70, maybe upwards of 100 outlets this year. So he does an amazing job just getting us in places. But again, I think the number one way we've driven traffic in the last year has been through online advertising and primarily Facebook.
Yeah, so, talking about all these different marketing channels and the hyper growth that you guys are going through, maybe tell us a little bit how you're managing all of this. When there's so much going on, I think, you obviously have a team working for you now, but I would say it's probably relative to other people that are maybe solo founders with a much smaller business that's not going through as much growth. What are your tips, I guess, on how to manage all these things that are going on, making sure that you're aware of what's going on and making sure you're making the decisions with all the information that you can get? Like, how do you guys handle all of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of speak in regards to some of the influencer marketing strategy. We used to have our systems really structured and in place, for myself, and I kind of have an assistant helping me do some of the research and development there. But yeah, we have our systems in place, and everybody's going to be different. How they like to keep it structured. That's something I've always been taught is, there's a few ways to do it, however it makes sense to you. If whether it's in spreadsheets, and that's how we've done a lot of our influencer outreach, and it's a lot of grind work. We don't necessarily like to work with a ton of big agencies to do the work for you, and we've tried it before. It just necessarily hasn't worked out to our liking. We kind of are pretty demanding on the results and kind of the success that we have through some of these outlets that are definitely crucial to the business and growing on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And you just got to have your systems, kind of what your goals are. Weekly and monthly, that's something I'm always harping on my guy. He'll tell you, and if we're not hitting our goals, it's definitely a problem, we stay on task, and we understand what is expected, what is going to make us successful, we're just on it.
Yeah. I mean, we have a team, right now we've gone through different stages where we've had, like Andrew said, things outsourced, different agencies for even online advertising, brought that in-house, a little bit of influencer marketing, brought that in-house. And then, we're a small team, we're lean, we're super lean for how, the size we are right now, and so, but we got a great team, really talented and really committed and believe. So, I mean, as any successful entrepreneur, I think, can speak to, it's like, talent, I think, outweighs, and people outweigh anything. So hiring is hard, but, I think once you find talent, you got to swoop it up and just kind of shepherd it along the way.
Yeah.
So can you give us an idea of how successful the business is today, whether it be the growth or the size of the business?
Yeah. So we obviously launched our first Kickstarter, and then 2014 was kind of a little bit of a year where we were figuring it out. We didn't really know. And then in 2015, we had like our breakout year. That was last year. And so we did like 10x growth. And then this year we're projecting to do upwards of like 15 million in revenue. So a huge growth from that first, year of kind of hovering in the $500,000, $700,000 range to where we are now.
Wow, that is a huge kind of uptick. What do you guys? I'm sure there's more than one reason, but are there a few things that you can kind of credit this big spike to? Yeah,
I think, it's being really. I think the first couple of years we were you can validate a product more quickly than 2 years, but like for us, we were kind of setting the stage for this. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what 2013, 2014, and even part of 2015 up until we finished that second Kickstarter campaign was about. And then really turning on the jet fuel, being like, we can do this. We got it to work, and we were just able to scale campaigns online. I mean, our online advertising, granted, it's a difficult ball game. I mean, direct DR marketing is not easy, and it takes a product that the consumers like at a price that they're willing to pay. And I think we've been really fortunate and blessed to a certain extent to be able to do what we do. I think having the right product offering and, again, right pricing strategy, it's huge. And then I think we're at a point now where, we're looking for additional channels to help grow the business. We're really going to be planning on pushing into retail next year. And obviously keep maintaining our online sales growth. But it's a lot to juggle, but it's fun, and a lot of ups and downs, and definitely more exciting times than not.
And do you remember what maybe sometime last year or maybe the last year where you realized like, wow, this is really taking off? Do you guys remember looking at each other and saying this is going to become many millions of dollars in revenue?
Yeah, it was pretty much this time last year, rolling into Q4. The barrel was on the market. Was the 64 on the market?
No, just the classic.
Yeah, so the classic and the barrel were both on the market. We were stocked up. That was another thing that we had came across in the first 2 years, is we'd have great selling seasons, and then we run out of our best A SKUs. We would be sold out. So obviously that's detrimental to your total revenue. But last year, we were skewed up. We had a ton of inventory when we were ready to rock and roll. I think at that time we had just brought on our art director, and he was creating rad content. We were getting it out in front of everybody right around this time, and we were like, oh, here we go. And since then we've just successfully launched 3 more collections. So
Very cool. And you mentioned, I think, Ron, you mentioned that the right pricing strategy was also big for you guys. Can you speak more to that? Like, what do you mean by, how did you figure out the pricing, and what do you mean by the pricing strategy?
I love this topic, and it's one that honestly drives me insane. I feel like nobody in the office wants to hear me talk about it anymore. But no, because it's so important, right? You know, it's your margin. I mean, obviously everyone's margins are different based on their cost of goods, but I just think if it's for us, like we played with it. Like, so in 2015, we looked at, we price tested full on. Like our Classic is now priced at $169. I mean, it's definitely not something you always want to do because it's tough on the consumer side to see. Maybe they notice, maybe they don't, but I do think it's that important that I was willing to do that and almost in some sense risk, what it looked like on the outside. But, we had it priced all the way down, I think like 129 at one point. And what we noticed was it didn't really shift sales that much, at least not enough to make it worth it. Right. And there's going to be a point where there's like there's a delta there. Right. And so for us, I also think because of the handcrafted nature and the way we market the product, that there's also a point where it seems too cheap, like, well, if it's only $100, like what if we played in the $100 range? Like, it would be difficult from a margin standpoint, but we thought, well, maybe we'd sell a lot more watches and we make it worth it. Well, I don't think so it's also about understanding how you're marketing your product, how you want to market your product, and how the consumer is going to look at it at a certain price point. So anyway, it's something I put a lot of thought into. I also look really closely at what competitors do. Again, the watch market has exploded. I mean, it's crazy in the last year and a half, 2 years, with online brands just kind of popping up and having success, and they, again, they kind of take that direct to consumer pricing model. And so, that was another reason why, I thought about it, but ultimately I wanted to maintain the brand image. Not that they don't have a good one, but I just wanted to be who we are and work in a different price range. So we're currently we'll be in the $150 to $400 price range.
Right.
Wow. So even though you decrease the prices, I'm looking at the prices now, they're $149, $169, $189 as well. Even though you decrease the prices, you didn't see an uptick in the sales?
Not enough to make it. I mean, Obviously there was a little bit, but you're making, well, 120 and that's $40. My math's not wrong. Right. Not enough to make it worth it. And that's a lot of money, when you're talking about a lot of watches. So, and more margin to work with on the marketing side. I mean, it's to a certain extent, that's $40 more you can spend on marketing. Right. And so, there's just a happy medium there. And it's something that I'm a little bit obsessive about, but I think it's important, especially early on. And I think early on for companies can be the first year or two. I mean, it's not like ideally you want to make those decisions as quickly as possible, but don't be afraid to test it and see what the reaction is and then make a decision.
For sure.
Yeah, I think one of the difficult things when it comes to testing things like the pricing strategy or even A/B testing anything is trying to control all the other elements that could affect it. Are there any ways to kind of mitigate that or at least normalize the data so that there aren't other factors that might be, impacting the changes in the sales just because you changed the pricing?
Well, that's a good question. I was going to just touch on the fact that pricing is really difficult because, technically you're not allowed to A/B test on the same day a price point. It's literally against the law. So, I know Amazon, I think at one point had some issues with that where they were actually advertising one price and then someone would get another price and their friend would be like, wait a minute, I saw it for in the same day. I think this was years ago, but, and I could be wrong, but don't sue me, Amazon. But, But that's one of those things that made it really difficult. I don't know. I think for us, the way we quote unquote normalized it, taking these difficulties into consideration was just by running it for more than a day or more than 2 days. We would run it for a month.
Test it for a month.
And then look at the data, and at the end of the day, that's the beautiful thing about, kind of the world we live in right now. And, I think right now, the easiest way to validate and know if you're going to have something is to run it via or promote it via online advertising and see how it sticks. There's a lot of companies still popping up, taking a more traditional retail route. But if I were to start a company today, I would still lean on that in the beginning stages.
Makes sense. So now we're in Q4. So obviously the holiday season is pretty much here. What are you guys doing to prepare for this holiday shopping season?
Well, we're releasing our best collection yet. Something that our consumers have been waiting for. Definitely are following. They've been wanting something a little nicer, something that higher end, and we're really excited about. So we just released that.
And then I think a lot of the preparation has actually already taken place back in. That was one thing we learned, right? It was like I remember last year this time, we were kind of in the heat of the moment, like right now, like doing a bunch of crazy like photo shoots, trying to get it all ready. Like we've actually taken care of a lot of that legwork.
Right.
And so we've already placed bids, or I guess signed IOs with different media companies for paid placements on gift guides, and gotten in some for free through our PR outreach, and then also just kind of seeding the watch as we always do to different influencers who will then promote it during the holidays. I mean, the key for the holidays is it is without a doubt, as everyone knows, like this goes without saying, the best time of year to sell anything online. So. Really, in general, the best time to sell anything. So I think it's just about getting the name anywhere and everywhere, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and like kind of just going into that, you kind of scale your whole market, your strategy behind. You have your projections of what you want to sell. So in turn, you need to be spending that much more. It's this Q4 is going to be where we're setting more watches. We're doing a little bit extra because we know. We have projections on what we want to get to, and to get there, we need to be spending X,
Very cool. So, obviously had a crazy 12 months for you guys. I'm sure you guys are going to kill it during this Q4 as well. Where do you want to see the business this time next year?
I want to see the business. I would say the number one thing I would like to see us next year is in retail. I really see, look, 85 to 90% of watch sales still actually happen in retail. And this does not discount online, because I'm a firm believer in that. But I would love to see us taking on that approach and, having a hybrid effect of online versus retail, and seeing that work together. I think it will have amazing results where people can actually see. One thing we do a lot of, sorry to get a little bit off topic, but Andrew also manages a lot of our on-site activations, different, like we were at the Do Tour, and we've been at a lot of different like street fairs, just to kind of see what people's reactions are in somewhat of a retail environment. And that was kind of what cued us that like, we need to get these into shops. Like people see the product and they automatically they're like, this is like, they may have seen it online, right, through a Facebook ad. And then they come to the street fair or whatever it might be, and they're like, this is amazing. Like I would have totally bought this if I had seen it in person from the beginning. And so, anyway, a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, I would love to see us in retail next year, and obviously just continuing to grow.
Yeah. And kind of on the brand side, something that Ryan and I have been definitely working on a ton over the last year is, bringing we want to do a lot more very unique stories. The whiskey barrel is kind of it's been one of our best sellers, and we want to continue that going forward, to be able to tell stories, maybe more limited watches, more uniqueness, collaborations. We actually have a few special collaborations coming out this year. Just really tying in our marketing to the consumers we want to reach, and just being super unique with our product. It's our stuff is special, with the wood. You can tell a ton of stories, and there's a ton of history there. And we're going to go out and get that and be very unique this year.
Very cool. Thanks so much, Ryan and Andrew. So originalgrain.com, again, is a website. Anywhere else you recommend the listeners check out if they want to follow along with what you guys are up to?
Yeah, check out our Instagram at Original Grain. We're just posting a ton of unique fashion, and just some of our best styles and shots that we have. So yeah, you can find us there.
Cool. Thanks so much again for your time, guys.
Cheers, man. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com/masters to claim your extended 30-day free trial.